Exciting step. It's right in the middle of your PhD. So if you're not doing what you think a PhD student has to be doing, maybe you're just not in that phase yet. You somehow have to show your committee you're ready. You're ready to do it now. There's lots of smaller ways to publish and smaller venues to present. Everyone else in your cohort is doing the same thing. Very rare that you'll start your research in your first year. Hi everyone, thank you so much for clicking on this video. I'm so happy to have you here and I'm excited to tell you about the different phases that I think there are when you're doing a PhD. I'm a PhD student, 5th year PhD student at the University of Hawai'i at Mānoa in the Department of Second Language Studies. I'm almost done with my PhD and I'm going to tell you the different steps I went through, the different phases that I went through in the United States because it's different in other countries. Also, I just came home from teaching a class. I'm teaching a class in Second Language Studies. It's a fun class, but this is the 3rd time one of my students commented on my vest being European fashion. Now I feel like I don't want to wear it anymore to school. But anyway, let's get started. You're doing a PhD or you want to do a PhD and you're wondering, what is that like? Usually PhDs are 4 or 5 years. You can take longer and often that's the case too. So people say they're about 4 to 7 years long. So I think there are 4 main phases in your PhD and the first 2 are before your comprehensive exams or before your prospectus or any kind of exam that's in the middle, and the second 2 are after. And let's just start with the first one. You come to your school, you just applied and just wrote this super long project proposal. You had to talk to your future advisor a lot about like what kind of work you want to do, what kind of research you want to do. So you're really excited to start your research, but then you start your program and you notice you won't have to do with this research for a long time actually. So the first phase is just taking classes. And they're often not even related to what you're studying. So I wanted to do something about language teaching, but I also had to take classes in social linguistics, in regular linguistics, in bilingualism. So many unrelated classes too. But while you're taking these classes, you have so much stuff to do, so many projects for each class, sometimes exams for each class, that you don't even have time to think about your own project. And you might be taking the classes that your advisor is teaching. Maybe those are the ones that are a little bit more related, and maybe your advisor lets you work on your project or like work on a proposal of your project, at least for their classes. But realistically, you're so out of touch that all you're doing is your classes. And everyone else in your cohort is doing the same thing, so it's very rare that you'll start your research in your first year or in this first phase, which usually is about a year or a year and a half. Obviously, it depends on kind of what kind of program you're in, whether you came in on a grant that has some data collection scheduled right away, then you might be doing that. But even if you do data collection, that's what Alexus did, for example, you don't really have a good or clear idea of what you're going to do yet at that point. And things might change, or your project might change too. So in the second phase, which is kind of in the second year or second half of the second year, you'll start preparing for, the final comprehensive exam where you just have to prove either in written or oral form you are ready to actually work on your project. Like you have the background knowledge to work on your project. And that's also when you'll be writing out your prospectus. So your prospectus is kind of a better proposal, a better project proposal. It just means you know what you're going to do, what research questions you're going to have, you know exactly which sites you're going to use, you know your literature, now you just have to do it. So you somehow have to show your committee you're ready. You're ready to do it now. You're ready to conduct your research. So the second phase is really all about that. Whether there's exams, not every program has the comprehensive exams. You might also have a QP qualifying paper, which just means that you have to do 1 research project that you do. Oh, actually you might have to do 2. Yeah, instead of comps, you would have 2 research projects, and they're supposed to be a little bit more leading the way to your dissertation project than the comprehensive exams would, because they are really, really broad. But either way, the second phase is really all about getting either your QPs done or prepping for your comms and getting your prospectus ready. So maybe you're still taking classes, but You don't care about them that much anymore. Everyone's kind of at a different stage, getting your prospectus ready, getting set up to do your research. I'll put comms or QPs. You also have to fill out a form that you send to the grad school or to the university, I don't know exactly, that the committee says, okay, you're good to get started on your dissertation. So after this, the third phase starts. And you know how I said the first two are before your exams, that major turning point. The second two steps are after. And actually after this, here in the first two, you're called a PhD student. Oh, that's ugly. After, you're called a PhD candidate. So we have stages 3 and 4, and these are now as a PhD candidate. Exciting step. It's right in the middle of your PhD, and as I said, it could be after your second year, it can be after the first half of your third year, something like that. But once you're done, once you've defended your prospectus, once you're done with that step, you start working on your dissertation. So the first phase of your dissertation, you're honestly very, very probably scatterbrained, confused. Imposter syndrome is one of the biggest in that stage, just because you've already been in the program for 3 years and you're only starting your project. You don't know how any of it works, honestly, because even though you've taken all those classes and you wrote the prospectus, nothing really prepares you for actually doing it. So yeah, this is just the feeling overwhelmed, getting started with a huge project that has to be done in, I don't know, 2 years now, 2.5 years maybe. So you're just trying your best to get things started. And I think what's also really scary about this phase is that your entire PhD is kind of based on how well you do in this phase. And obviously your committee is there to help you, but since it's a PhD, you're very, supposed to do it on your own. So this is maybe your dissertation, maybe, how do I call it? Until in the fourth phase, you mostly only have to write. So dissertation writing. And here you notice that all of a sudden things are getting done really quickly. Things are wrapping up really quickly. It felt like you spent such a long time from here to here, and all of a sudden everything that you've done just has to be written up and then you're done. It's also a very scary phase, but maybe you're so exhausted from the phases above that you feel like you don't care about your project as much anymore. You kind of get tired of your project. You kind of don't want to see it anymore. You also learn a ton during all of those phases, that while you're writing up everything in the end, you notice what you did in the beginning maybe wasn't the smartest. And now you have to write up what you did when you were still learning. Maybe that also adds to you not feeling the best about your project anymore. But yeah, that's just when you start writing up everything, you start working long hours, but you're just writing. Here you work long hours when you're finishing your project, but it's mostly kind of a chill phase where you're just testing out the waters. Here, you work long hours because you need to get your prospectus done. The prospectus, studying for comms, you're already putting more effort in, or you're already putting more hours in. Then here, maybe it gets a little bit easier again, hour-wise, except if your data collection kind of requires you to do something overnight, or to, I don't know, work with people the way their schedule works, like if you have participants, but the hours are not as long as in this phase and in this one, where you really have to push towards the deadline and get things done. Again, this might be very different for very different fields, programs, but that's what I have heard and seems to be the most common thing. And then maybe one last thing about what kind of work you will produce in each of these phases. The most common products that you have throughout an academic career is publications and conference presentations. So being a PhD student, you definitely start participating in those, but it looks very different in each of those phases. So in the first one, as I said, you don't really have much from your project yet. You might even lose sight of it. So there's nothing really to present about. So usually the conference presentations that you do there are either about your master's research or about your undergrad research, if you did anything like that, or you happen to be on a project with your advisor, like a larger project where you actually have some something to present, yeah, that's not entirely your own work. You might also want to present classwork, even though usually those are smaller projects, so you might only present them at like interdepartmental conferences. You might publish papers that are in interdepartmental journals or conference proceedings or things like that. You can publish in like newsletters, you can publish on websites. There's lots of smaller ways to publish and smaller venues to present. Or you can obviously also present the plans that you have going forward. But yeah, none of those are really made for big conference or big publications. Then in the second phase, I don't think you really have time to publish anything. If you're in a program that does the QP version, then you might be able to just publish that QP, which would be great. But if your program doesn't do that, I think you're just so overworked that there's not too many options to present. Then once you're in your third year, you start having, or not third year, in the third phase. It can obviously be different years, but once you're in the third phase, you start having some pilot data, you start having a really good idea of what you're going to do. If you're going to use new methods to approach something, maybe that's already valuable to present. So you start having at least some things. Some people already start finishing up maybe a first chapter here. If the first chapter has like very general data that doesn't require too much analysis, that's something you can publish or that you can start presenting. The real work only gets done in the last phase, or the real work gets finished up in the last phase. So you don't really have anything from your own dissertation to present and to publish until then. As I said, there's many other things you can publish, there's many other things you can present on, and you should definitely make use of those opportunities. But especially if your project requires a little bit of more detailed analyses, you won't get to disseminate those kind of results until the very end. And that's not ideal, because once you're looking for jobs, which you're also supposed to start doing a year before you graduate, you sometimes don't have a publication at all. Maybe haven't even thought about it yet, or haven't even started writing it. Maybe you thought about it but haven't started writing about it. Even though it's not ideal, know that many students feel like this. And maybe the same goes for networking. I know when I started my PhD, everyone kept saying network, make sure that you meet people, make sure that you show them what you're interested in. Honestly, after taking all of those classes, I didn't even know what I'm interested in anymore, because I learned about so many more things. All of a sudden, I liked all of those. So I didn't even really know who to contact, what to tell them about, because I wasn't doing any research. And I think that's fine. That's what I felt like. That's what many people that I've talked to felt like. So it's okay if you feel like that too. You don't have to worry about that, because the networking will actually come organically. Once you're in these two stages, you have a much better idea of who you need to talk to, who you're citing, who you will actually be working with once you're done with your dissertation. So don't stress about it in the first two phases, because it doesn't have to be that hard. If it's hard to you, maybe you don't need to do it. Not saying a PhD is not difficult, it's very difficult. It depends. But there's lots and lots of difficult parts about it, and we actually have a video coming up on whether a PhD is difficult. But yeah, just know that there's so many different phases of the PhD, and it's very common to feel very differently in each of the phases, to be doing very different work in each of the phases. So if you're not doing what you think a PhD student has to be doing, maybe you're just not in that phase yet. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. I hope this helps you. If you have any more questions, definitely let me know. Subscribe to this channel if you want, because we have lots of more videos about PhD life in Hawaii, grad school tips, and we're actually going to be traveling a lot for some conferences, because we're both in the third and fourth phase of our PhD. So we have lots of conferences coming up. Actually, Alexus has them coming up. I'm not going to any. But yeah, we're going to be taking you with us. So definitely subscribe to see how the conferences are going and where we get to go. Thank you so much for watching this. I appreciate all of you, especially if you're still watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye. Okay, testing the microphone, testing.